Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It is it's a pretty chill January morning. I mean, Omicron's on the rise. But other than that, it's been a pretty chill week. I mean, the Pope said something about people who don't have kids and who only have pets are like, shortchanging themselves. But it's not that big of a deal. The popes are notorious for saying dumb shit.
What if you don't have kids or pets? Yeah. God tier selfish. Yeah, it's so funny how people get upset when the Pope says something. It's like, are you Catholic? Do you really care? Oh, the Pope said something. Great. Awesome.
He let us know. Like, he let it all be known. Like, if you don't have kids.
I'm just amazed that anybody can still be Catholic into 2022, where I'm like, who are these people? What is keeping someone like, yeah, this is the one, I'm gonna die on this particular hill? And it's like, not to say that any religion's any more worth dying on that hill than any other one, but Catholicism in particular, I'm like, man, after all that we've learned about the Catholic Church and their doctrine, for that matter, it's like, I guess, if you never left your town and assume everything that's not the Bible is witchcraft, then maybe. I guess. And that's where I'm like, that's not just, like I said, that's not to say any other religion is any more rational necessarily, but Catholicism in particular, that's where I'm like, you just haven't, like, with the guilt alone that comes from being a Catholic, I feel like that would be the impetus to leave. I'd be sick of getting gaslit all the time as an adult, where I'm like, I can just voluntarily leave this.
Well, it's just the idea. It's like, who the fuck does this guy think he is? Is he the fucking Pope? Like, why does it even matter at this point? Who has cats and who doesn't have kids? There are billions of humans,
Yeah.
Let people have cats if they don't have kids. Let them have dogs. Who cares? Maybe they find it rewarding. I think there's a strange culture of like expecting people to reproduce.
Yeah, and it's like the easiest thing to reproduce, and people make it seem like reproducing should be some sort of mark of adulthood, when I'm like, that's the easiest thing to do, is to reproduce, where not reproducing and then being able to control your biological urges is like more worthy of rewarding in my opinion, because that's where I'm like, it seems like a lot of the stuff in the West is designed to produce workers or citizens for a nation, and they don't actually care about making sure that the person raising the child has the capacity to raise the child. Otherwise, we would have more social systems of support. And that's where I'm like, it totally seems like it's meant to serve the system and not the individual's actual family structure, because as far as I can tell, the nuclear family, I know it existed at some point, but as far as I can tell, the structure has always been meant to survive in conditions in which there isn't enough for everyone to live on their own. So it's not, the nuclear family is more a byproduct of necessity rather than some sort of cultural unity. It's like, it's not that the families are functional, they just have to live together. And that's where, you know, even like the Willy Wonka family, that's like a that's a family that's in a
Charlie
kid
and Grandpa
story,
Joe and the other,
and they're not functional at all. They could barely be considered functional, and then the only reason they become more functional is because the kid lucks out.
it's like a dark allegory about welfare state or something.
Oh, it's very dark. Willy Wonka's super dark.
Well, all of Roald Dahl's literature was really dark, but
I thought it was dark when I was reading it as a kid,
Yeah.
and then the older I got, it always became more dark. It was never at any point like a bright story to me.
Oh no! Like any of his stories, all of his stories that were rendered by Tim Burton, and you know, given soundtracks by Danny Elfman, all that stuff was the creepiest. Those were the creepiest stories brought to life when I was, you know, like a teenager and young adult. And I just remember thinking like, it was always like this, but man, these guys are just like really making me uncomfortable.
There's a lot about every aspect of the Willy Wonka story is social commentary that when you unpack it, none of it says anything good. None of it. And even down to like the broadcasting and turning the person into the object of the broadcast, and like that becoming a negative byproduct of an accident. And there's all these things about, and the only reason I even picked that story is because it's like the things that then get presented as kids' stories, when you really start to look at them, if you're critical of society, all of these things have been there the whole time. It's just on people to interpret what they're looking at through a critical enough lens to be like, oh, okay, this social commentary, it still applies today, but that's only if you're seeing the proper interpretation, and that's not a kid's story. And I mean, not to say that some kids wouldn't be able to understand it, but I think the issue is this gets back. Okay,
you know, maybe they are kids' stories, and there's a generation of adults who didn't get to read them as children, and so they're being confronted with these things now as adults, where they can see the clarity and they're not able to suss it out in a weird fantasy nightmare world.
Right. And that's what I was about to allude to is some things are multi-layered because they're onions. And when you get to the center, it's not something that smells good. So you need to have it take time to get to through the outer layers and peel back. So it's like that.
Blossom.
Yeah. And kid doesn't really need to understand the full Willy Wonka story. Like, hey, basically, the only way you're gonna get out of this situation is if you get a golden fucking ticket in a candy bar. And guess what? That's not gonna happen, kid. This is a fantasy. Fantasy. And that's like the actual lesson from Willy Wonka. Like, oh, you're born into this family that has to live in one house because they can't afford an actual home for grandpa, an actual bedroom for the kids. Guess what? The only way out of that is a golden fucking ticket in a candy bar because you're going to be eating candy anyway to get some sort of fucking joy in this joyless existence, kid. That's basically... And guess what? When you win that fucking ticket, everybody's going to want to be a sycophant. And then they're going to become parasites. You want that, kid? You went from being a poor little shit to now everybody wants to eat off of you. Do you like that, kid? Yeah, that's the real Willy Wonka story when you get a chance to grow up and unpack all of the things that happen.
It's like the Mike Tyson story, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to float off into this fantasy elevator into the sky. Nope. That's bullshit. That shit eventually hits the ground. You can't float up there forever, kid. The end. And it's way darker when you understand.
And then they get into that great glass elevator, and then they fly off into this, and it gets even weirder.
Yeah. That elevator has to come down eventually. Somebody's got to eat. You can't, there's no toilet in that elevator.
I wonder what kind of rotten bread he was eating when he was writing all this shit. Some really, really hardcore like pumpernickel, and it was rotten. It's all, all sorts of mold all over it. He's just hallucinating like mad.
I mean, poverty, man. Poverty will make you come up with some crazy ways to kill your boss in your mind. Like, yeah, we'll float up in the sky and let him starve to death. Willy Wonka and Charlie never ate again.
Well, they had those everlasting gobstoppers.
Yeah.
Somehow they can derive sustenance from their teeth. They derive sustenance from their teeth. And don't get me wrong, I like candy. I don't know anyone who doesn't like candy, but there's also like I'm a weird man. I'll drink soda all day long, and it's just liquid candy, and I know it. And then there'll be days where I drink a lot of juice, and my body is like, oh, thank you for not doing that to me. But one way or another, we find ways to get sugar, and we find ways to stimulate the taste buds. And lately, I've been thinking about like all the ways to tone it down so that I can appreciate like real subtleties. Because right now, everything is just, it's like pizzas and bagels with, salami and feta cheese. I can't taste anything right now.
I mean, it is good to. Well, do you ever fast?
Like the intermittent fasting thing.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be that, but that's one type of fasting. But
I think I go through periods where I'm just not hungry.
Yeah, that's not fasting.
Yeah.
And that like fasting is actively having, like, there's times where you're like just not being hungry is not it isn't fasting. That's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Or just being hungry, or not being hungry is not the same as fasting, and that's what I mean.
Not being hungry and not eating for like periods of time,
that's not fasting.
Like approaching like 2 days and stuff.
Fasting is like through the periods of active hunger and still not eating.
Okay.
That's gonna be the difference, because it's like, yeah, anybody can not eat when they're not hungry. But fasting is like actively not eating when you're hungry as part of the period, and having like a solid, you can't do it just at a whim. It's like there has to be a definite beginning and end. Otherwise, there's no like, there's no restraint.
It's not just like I forgot to eat for like 3 days. It's like an intentional thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No. I mean, I might forget to eat for a couple days.
That's not this. Yeah, that's not fasting.
That's not fasting.
And that's like,
that's just forgetting to eat.
I mean, and even then, if you're forgetting to eat, you're probably drinking sugar and taking in like thousands of calories through soda. So you're actually not fasting. Like, just because you're not eating solid food doesn't mean you're not taking in calories. And that's where fasting is like 0 calories basically. And it's gonna be like, in some cases, people will be like, no water either, but that's like the most extreme.
No water,
form.
really?
Yeah. That's like one form.
That seems a little much.
I mean, it's the most extreme. That's what I'm saying. There's like,
I bet by the end of that fast, you're like sweating out like salt crystals and.
I mean, yeah, like you don't really sweat them out. That's when you see form. Exactly. You see them, like people's mouths start to get white and shit, because there's like salt coming through their skin and they're not hydrated enough to actually sweat it out. So yeah, it's exactly what happens. And their pits too, like when you don't have enough water to sweat out, but you also need to excrete, it like causes your body to do crazy shit, which is why it's something that is like good to reset the body's like systems, but you can't do it too much, or else then it like permanently throws off your body's systems. And that's where people will overdo that shit, and it's a matter of like finding the point of diminishing returns and actively not going beyond it. Because it's like,
have you done the waterless fast?
No, I'll never fast without water. It's just
that just seems like
that's like a religious fast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, and that's to me like, yeah, that's the only time it's gonna actually be appropriate. And a lot of people break that part of it. And that's fine. The actual shit will like rationalize even. And this is the crazy part, is like a lot of the religious rules are not as strict as people make them out to be. So for example, like the whole like prayer 5 times a day thing. If you're doing something that is like in the service of your position in earth, that is something that God puts you there to do, it's okay not to like break doing that to go pray. And that's fine. But people will be like, no, I got to go pray because this is part of my religion. But it's like, no, actually, if you like read your own fucking religion, you'd see it's okay for you not to do that if it's like something that's really, truly important. But if you're like filling out an Excel spreadsheet, no, you need to go pray. Like if you're not doing anything that's like really important, if it's just like part of a job that's anybody can fucking do, no, you need to go pray. So it's not even a fine line. It's more so like there's clear times when you're doing shit that's not in line with what you're here and what your larger purpose is doing. And you need to go fucking pray if that's your religion. But if you're
clearly there's some kind of like Overton window for religion where extremism exists on it, outside of this. Maybe it's a spider graph. Well, anyways, extremism of any kind and orthodoxy and what is like the the ultimate expression of religious devotion or whatever. That's like somewhere that's outside of that window actually, and most people occupy that window or that center location of the spider graph. Right? That's what I'm kind of getting this vibe out of it.
Yeah, and part of it is
but the identification of it is not necessarily as balanced as the reality.
No, and here's the thing. The way I've read it and interpreted it, and you can't just look at it from one text. So from multiple texts and from seeing how piety has been defined from multiple locations, the problem with piety is that you actually have to be faced with the choice in order to say that you chose to do the right thing. Like, for example, if someone is an alcoholic, simply removing themselves from every situation in which alcohol is being offered does not actually solve the step of them becoming past being able to say no. They have to actually be able to be offered alcohol and say no to get to that next step. And it's the same thing with if someone is a monk and they live on a mountaintop and they claim to be pious, that's all good, but you can't stay on that mountaintop and not go down into the actual city and the actual existence among human beings. Like, you have to do that in order to fulfill the other part of becoming pious. It's not even like you can't just remove yourself from all sinful choices and then say that you're pious. That's not how it works in any religion. And I think the issue becomes when people see things like monks or hermits or like the Gregorian monks, they get this idea in their mind that that person is the highest form of that religion, not understanding how those people came to those places and that those things are not permanent and that those people can be kicked out of those places for breaking rules. So there's all these things about the hermit or the Buddhist monk or the Bodhisattva or the Brahmin. They are parts and aspects of these religions, but they are not meant to be permanent states. And if you stay there permanently, that means you've stopped growing spiritually, even within all of those religions. So that's kind of where.
Yeah, I think it's interesting.
It's never meant to be a permanent place.
Gregorian monks always are like the most common reference. I think if we search, I bet Gregorian monks come up like the highest amount of searches. But there's Cappuccino apparently takes its name from the Capuchin friars. But I think that's way cooler. Like if that's really true.
I mean, there's a whole
like a bunch of monks that came up with cappuccino. That's really cool.
There's a church that brews its own beer that only has a set amount of brew once every year, and you have to get on a list to get it, and they don't do any more. And it's like shit like that. You'll find cool them. Too. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's like, but that is more in line with something that's more permanent than somebody who you're not supposed to be there your entire life.
Yeah.
As like
you go there and learn how to do it, right?
Yeah, that's
and then you spread the knowledge.
I mean, you don't. Oh. You don't. I mean, you don't spread that specific brew.
No, you make your own beer.
But you spread like experiences that you've gained in that monastery, and you take your experiences and spread the word through having had that experience. You don't take the recipe with you. It's not something that's meant to be spread. Like, it's not that the recipe is holy or anything like that either, so much as like this is not meant to be industrialized. Like, you see what I mean? Like, this is not something that's meant to be commercialized. It's not meant to be made. It's not meant to make money. That supports the monastery.
It just exists for its own sake at this point.
Exactly. And that's the way it's always going to be, as long as it's in line with what it's meant to be. It's not meant to make money. They're not trying to build an army. They're not trying to start a state. They just make enough beer every year to support the monastery.
Yeah, they don't need a gas station. They
no more, no less. And that's why they don't have a bunch of monasteries. It's not a franchise. You see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
This thing is not meant to make money. It's meant to be something where you learn about yourself, you learn about them as an organization, and then you go away with something you feel is greater than yourself that you've gained. You're not, the way that our society has made it so that the only way to gain value is to monetize it to the nth degree, is the reason that those types of things are meant to exist. This whole exploit every aspect culture didn't just start. We just now have an internet, I mean, relatively now, that can exploit every fucking thing down to people's emotions. So that's where it's not that, you know, the emperors of the Roman Empire didn't want to exploit everything. They just didn't have an internet to exploit the ends of the earth.
So in the Discord, someone posted that some people are trying to gamify the U.S. court system. It turns out this isn't even the first time like a company is set out to take bets on like legal outcomes.
Oh, it's so terrible. It's so terrible. And you know what I'm realizing?
Cryptocurrency. People are going to be betting in Ethereum on the outcome of court cases.
As someone who has worked in game design and also worked in cryptocurrency design, the idea of my first foray into either being something that combines both is such an absurd notion. That's where I'm like, a lot of these people getting into cryptocurrency gaming design have never done game design, let alone designed a cryptocurrency. So it's like, I want to be optimistic about technology, but the way that these tech bros are rolling in like the last 15 years, it's all fake it till you make it. And then the people over promising, not understanding how much this shit actually costs, to where I'm like, man, these people have no idea what it costs to make a fucking video game. Like, I worked on a game for fucking kids that wasn't a AAA game. And like the budget for the audio parts alone was like $250,000 over 3 years. And that's where I'm like, that's just the audio alone. So I don't know. It must have been 3 or 4 times that for the like the 3D design shit, and then the animations, and then the logic. So this is where I'm like, a kid's game that's not even AAA, we're looking at millions of dollars and years of game design, where people think you can just slap together some shit in RPG Maker and call it a game because it has digital avatars and you have some semblance of points, and that's not a fucking game. And I'm just like, I mean, this is not that, but when I see people talking about gamifying somebody's like legal battles, it's like, man, I'd be okay if all the technology got wiped out with the solar flare right now, because it's not really being used for good at all. Like, I'm okay. You know, I love video games. I love virtual shit. But at this point, when I see shit like that, I'm like, you know what? A digital flood, so to speak, or some sort of mass world event where like solar flares just reset everything and we had to start all the digital shit all over, I'd be fine with that at this point. I mean, when I hear shit like that, I'm cool.
It's the kind of thing that just leads to more attempts at market manipulation and and just people playing, stockbroker with money that's not even real.
And people's fucking lives. Court cases now.
Yeah.
Because then there was before it's not even attached to a cryptocurrency where you could sell shares in yourself. So if you're somebody who's like a recent graduate, it's as dumb as it fucking sounds, man. And some tech company got probably billions of dollars to build this shit. So if you were like a recent business school graduate, say you're like, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna sell 1 million shares of myself that vest over the next 5 years, and they can't cash them out until X amount of time has elapsed. But I'm gonna pay out 10% of my earnings, or 30, or it's usually going to be like 30% or something stupid, for the people that invested in me. And that's where I'm like, this is just indentured servitude. But because people didn't learn what indentured servitude means, they didn't realize that they're just reinventing indentured servitude in the form of an app. And then you get people who have debt doing that. Like, so they already have student loan debt. So then they look at this as a way to get more capital, not realizing that it's just basically taking on more debt. And then they never get out of it. And it becomes this. I was going to say, basically anybody who took on debt in the last 30 years was put into a situation where they're probably not going to actually be able to get out of it unless they solely focus on that debt for like 5 to 10 years of their life. It won't be something that you can do in like a year, because the way that the interest rates work, it adds up too fast. So then you're like, oh shit, I got to get, there might be penalties if I try to pay it off early. And you read the fine print, and a lot of these debts will have caveats that you can't pay it off early without incurring some sort of penalty, which is it's fucking absurd. Obviously that's absurd. But at the same time, I see there's just an American apathy towards financial systems and information that allow that shit to perpetuate. And then we end up with a generation of people in massive debt because inflation happened while the debts were happening. And then you get people with like $100,000 worth of debt on something that used to cost $5,000 before the inflation happened. And then there's different things happening on different parts of the landscape that Americans are actively not learning about, so that when you bring them up, they're going to not be informed enough to keep up with the conversation. And then it's never actually a problem in their minds.
So I've been reading, I've been seeing a lot of, and this has been ongoing for the past, I don't know, 6 to 9 months of COVID, year of COVID, whatever. There is like they're calling it the Great Resignation or something like that. And so there are people leaving careers all across all industries. It's not just service industry or restaurants, or it's the entire labor force is experiencing people just leaving, and they're doing whatever they want, and that's good for them. And it occurred to me that there's, for the last 20 years, it seems that there's just been a concentrated effort to automate. Just automate, and those automations replace jobs. And so when those jobs disappear, they don't usually come back because machines don't make mistakes. They don't get tired. They just have to power cycle eventually. And and more things are being automated, and more things are being bolstered by AI. Well, what they call AI. I guess it's like algorithmic intelligence. That makes way more sense than artificial intelligence. But even that stuff, like, some of it's indistinguishable from what humans write. And we talked about how that's it's happening with music. Eventually it'll happen with software. We're going to get software written by software, and we won't be able to tell. We just won't be able to tell. It'll be so perfect that it'll just function.
Yeah, we're already.
I mean, maybe
not far from there.
Maybe a lot of what we're seeing is actually the emergence of stable, automated, and algorithm-based systems that are allowing people to do more with their time. But it also means that they're not doing things like going out to eat, because they can stay home now and prepare a meal themselves.
Right.
And so,
which is the way it should be, right?
It sucks that some businesses are suffering because those people, they had a good business model in a previous iteration of the economy, but
but they probably didn't, and it was probably exploitative, and that's true. That's the problem. Is we're needing to get rid of those exploitative positions within society and automate them, because we have the means to automate them now. So we need to get rid of them and take the people who were formerly in them and put them in housing and give them free education so they can do something useful and that they're interested in, because we don't need to just have them working those ridiculously exploitative positions anymore, because we can automate them. And that's where the problem becomes the people who want to feel superior to a human being needing indentured servants and underemployed working class humans to exist. Once those people don't exist, who can they feel superior to anymore?
So I admit that when the hamburger flipping robot was first announced, I was kind of skeptical. I was like, yeah, this thing is just going to get nasty, and there's no way. But apparently it's cost effective, and they've designed it in such a way that it's easy to clean. And apparently the grease helps to keep it lubricated somehow, which is amusing as fuck to me. But even our burgers eventually will be made by machines, and they're going to be made so consistently. I mean, it wouldn't be a stretch that you could just have a profile with Burger King or with McDonald's And you could specify, I like my burger cooked a little bit more, or I want more of the char grilled flavor sprayed onto it than normal, whatever. They have that salt, and or I don't like a lot of mayonnaise. They'll be able to tailor this stuff. Have it your way will take on a whole new meaning. It won't be like down to the whimsy of somebody who probably has more interesting things on their mind that they could be doing. I'm also kind of saying, universal basic income. Let's get on with that. We can have burger stations that you don't have to you just go get a burger and just hands you a container with burgers and fries, and they're perfectly cooked every time. There's maybe 2 employees there at any given point to refill stuff, but otherwise it's all automated. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'm totally about that, and that the service economy shouldn't have been permanent.
Yeah,
it should never have been permanent. If the service economy is permanent, that's a problem. That means our society has a stagnant economy that is stuck with depending upon underemployed human beings to do a certain class of work that society has now deemed both essential but also low skilled simultaneously. So I'm saying, if it's so low skilled, why can't a fucking robot do it now? If these dancing robots out here doing these terrible interpretations of TikTok dances can't pick fucking lemons, then why are y'all underpaying Mexican immigrants?
Oh, because they need that robot. They need that robot dog that can open doors and chase people down and point a laser at them.
Yeah.
The robot dog is the one that really bothers me. They say it's oh, it's a mule. It can carry equipment. Yeah, right.
Bullshit.
They might have a large one that's basically a quad with I fail to see how a robot dog is going to be, or a robot mule is going to be anywhere near as effective as a quad with a winch. On nearly any terrain, and any terrain that a quad can't really get on to pull a bunch of equipment on, do you really think a robot's going to help you? Really? Seriously?
I feel like what has happened.
Who got sold on the robot dog?
Oh my
mule?
God.
That's the biggest. That person is an asshole. Whoever signed off on that first, straight up.
Yeah.
We don't need robot dogs. It's bad enough they train dogs
Nobody
to chase
needs
after
those
humans.
things.
That's the worst thing to do, is to train a dog to do that to a human at this point.
It's so uncreative. It's so uncreative.
We come on, give us robot surgeons that look like spiders. That would be fucking cool. It'd be terrifying, but it'd be fucking cool.
But how can it become a weapon?
I mean, you could scare the crap out of somebody as you repair the laceration above their eye and simultaneously reposition the bones of their orbital without damaging their eye socket.
Well, if it can't be made a weapon, it's not getting built here.
Well, they could terrify them while that was happening.
Sorry, you need to take that shit over to some communist country. Maybe they'll build it.
It could also do a whole bunch of dental work at the same time. Give this thing 16 legs with little clips at the end. They could some could be drills, some could be little pinchers, some could be little suction machines. Just I mean, that's way. That'd be no, people wouldn't be into that. That's too much.
You know what's crazy is that whole thing is applied at every facet of the economy. So it's
can it be weaponized, or can we make money off of it?
Yeah, and that's kind of where this. I mean, this becomes part of why you can't escape the Matrix. Is anything. Like I never. Okay, first off, let me say I never bought anything with Che Guevara's face on it. Not to say that I dislike. He's got some issues, and he did some fucked up shit. So I'm not about to like lionize him. But the idea of buying something with Che Guevara's face on it is so fucking stupid. Where I'm like, oh, they really weaponized this dude's ideas against anybody who thinks they're supporting him in one of the craziest and most laugh in your face ways possible. And that's where it's like, oh, this is how I see like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s quotes and his holiday being weaponized as a way to undermine actual spread of his ideas. Like we'll focus on 3 things he said and ignore all of the other socialist shit that he said and make it seem like he was colorblind and that he didn't have an anti-capitalist agenda. We'll erase that shit altogether. And then you realize how much work has been done to actually erase the socialist stuff that Dr. MLK was like all about. That was like most of the stuff he was about, whereas now it's been made to seem as if he was all about this one thing in Selma. And it's like, no, it was way more socialist. Way more socialist. But that's also where even down to like white institutions taking control of narratives of non-white people, like the whole, like how do I end up learning about Chinese migration into America from fucking a white institution? What the fuck is that shit? You know what I mean? Like there's things that people just live with and then they just don't question them ever in their lives. Where I'm like, okay, not to say that it needs to be coming from a Chinese person, but how did this definitely non-Chinese institution end up becoming the arbiter of Chinese history to me as an American citizen who has, in my mind, no allegiance to any specific nationality, but in their mind, they have an interest in forming my opinion about China and its history. And that's where I'm like, all of these things, even Africa, for example, like there was never any sort of actual, like I never had a Nigerian teacher teaching me about Africa or somebody from Ghana or fucking Uganda or anybody from the actual continent teaching me in those classes. But yet I'm learning about them through a post-colonial lens from a colonialist country that has a lot of interest in making me feel a certain type of way about how I see Africa as one big fucking, basically misinterpreted as a country because they're not really good about teaching about the nuance. And that's where, to this day, the way, like, for example, in Smallville, they'll be like referring to Africa and Egypt as if Egypt is not in Africa, and as if Egypt is on the same level of travel as Africa as a continent. And it's like, even just the example of Egypt, the way Egypt is removed from existing as if it's not in Africa and it's in the Middle East. Well, where do you
wait? So Africa is like north of South Africa, but west of Egypt. Mm-hmm. And Egypt also borders South Africa. So clearly Africa is just Sudan, right? Basically. And Sudan and Tunisia and Morocco. That's like all there is of the rest of Africa.
Yep.
But those are
and
like
Somalia,
those are all
which is
states within
perpetually
Africa.
used, and people will perpetually use Somalia as a state of anarchy and not actually learn anything about it.
But isn't Congo also like a place of perpetual anarchy and like you can't even go there kind of stuff? Like that's that like the way the media is
white people's minds. Yeah,
that's what I mean. Like, but where is Congo? Because Congo isn't even, that's like not part of Africa, right? Congo's its own thing. I'm just
right.
like it's
that's where Don Cheadle's from.
Oh God.
and he like took care of a hotel there one time.
Oh man.
That's where that shit is in people's minds. Which again, that's the problem with not getting some idea of Africa.
I mean, we didn't even touch on the entirety of the Ivory Coast, not just like the one state, but like all of the states that exist.
These are the same people who would rather think that a time travel event experience happened rather than them not admitting that they knew fuck all about South Africa. Like nobody knows fuck all about South Africa. So the idea of the Mandela effect becoming a national thing because nobody was willing to admit, hey, guess what? I don't know fucking jack shit about South Africa. I'm going to latch on. You know what? This childhood book I never actually read either. That makes more sense than the fact that I knew fuck all about South Africa. I didn't, guess what? I pretended I didn't know anything about South Africa when apartheid was going on so I could act like that shit wasn't happening so I couldn't do anything about it. But now time travel happened, which is why I can't remember things correctly. Not because I wasn't actively shying my face away from what was going on so I could pretend and not get involved.
Man, I always knew it was something horrible was going on in South Africa, just in the southern portion of Africa, because some dude was talking about the blacks. and he was just like, wait, what did that guy just say? And, it's like when you're a kid and you hear someone talking about the blacks and they're not saying black people, and it's like, wait, what the hell's going on? Clearly this isn't America. What the hell's going on there? Even kids can figure this shit out. It's not like people tried to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the weird part. Maybe people did try to hide it.
I mean, in America, people didn't have to hide it because Americans would actively turn their faces away. Americans weren't trying to fucking help apartheid. There were some black Americans trying to help do something about it, but rest of America was actively putting their heads in the fucking sand. I was there. I remember. America didn't give a fuck about apartheid when that shit happened. When it was going down, they would make movies about it. And fucking go, oh, that was an amazing movie. Well, fucking do something about it, motherfucker. Why don't you stop going and crying in the theater and go? I mean, not to say that they needed white saviors again, but it's like instead of going and watching movies about that shit, why don't you offer some actual fucking help instead of just making fucking theatrical versions of it.
That's the only way they know how to communicate, by telling other people's stories.
Yeah. Stealing stories at that. There's a movie called Serafina that I remember seeing when I was I must have been 9, where I'm like, wait a minute, this is still happening-ish? What's going on? Why is this a movie? Why aren't we doing something about it? But it was it was so weird to me to have that film exists, but then other people in America act like that shit, then they wouldn't go see Serafina. And that movie made $7.3 million. So I know if I'm one of the people that saw it, it ain't a bunch of other motherfuckers that saw it. It's just a very few motherfuckers that saw that film because people refuse to acknowledge that shit was going on in real life or a fictional world, apparently, because that's where I'm like, yeah, I remember seeing this and being like, wait, this is real? Because they weren't showing that shit on the fucking news. So I had to learn about apartheid. I mean, not to say that my parents were telling me about it, but to see the scale of it actually portrayed, where I'm like, whoa, this is like happening in real life, and people are like making other films. Like, y'all got time to make the Terminator while apartheid is happening? Y'all are fucked up. You mean to tell me this whole society's like doing Hollywood while apartheid is still happening? Hold the fuck up. You mean to tell me you're not going to stop fucking making goddamn entertainment to stop apartheid? Fuck y'all. Fuck y'all. I'm gonna remember that. I'm going to remember that. Fuck y'all for doing that, because y'all should have stopped everything to make sure apartheid wasn't happening anymore a long fucking time ago. You're telling me into the 90s? And I got to learn about it from a movie as a little black kid who's getting discriminated against in this country already, paying for it. My parents are paying for me to get discriminated against at every fucking turn. Fuck all y'all. Fuck all y'all. I'm going to remember this shit. And that's exactly why I remember that shit to the day. Because this is like, I'm in America trying to contextualize, like, what's happening with the police? What's going on with the police? Why are they just beating black people? I'm like 8, 9 years old trying to understand why as a species, we're constantly at war, and why I got to go to school and pretend this shit isn't like happening everywhere. I remember explicitly not understanding why people were going about their days as if we weren't at war with our own police force and this other shit wasn't happening around the world. I'm like, can't we just stop and fix this shit? No, I need to go to school. I need to fucking learn my ABCs or whatever the fuck we were doing in first grade and not fix apartheid. I just remember being so pissed as a kid that people just like not stop and fucking fix this shit. It's so crazy to me that we just haven't stopped for a day. Be like, hey, let's not shoot anybody today. And I mean, obviously we can't, if somebody wants to like murder somebody, they're not thinking rationally. So we can't just like stop those people. But if all the rational people are like, hey, let's stop the bullshit for a day and figure out who the murderous motherfuckers are. Because it'd be real easy if we were just like, hey, let's figure out all the fucking murderers. Let's just take a year and figure out all the murderous motherfuckers, because they're going to post some weird ass shit. They're going to post some crazy shit. We're going to be able to figure it out. But we got to stop all this other bullshit to be able to spot those among us that are out to harm us. Besides the just chaos of existence, there's motherfuckers out among us that are not team human. We need to figure those fuckers the fuck out. We do as a species, but if there's too much noise, there's no fucking way. There's no fucking way. So this police force is out trying to give people tickets for speeding and fucking, oh, you jaywalked. I'm going to give you a ticket, but I'm also going to go find murders. You're fucking stupid. You're stupid if you think you can handle all this bullshit and then go find a fucking murder. Guess what? I know you're dumb. I know you're stupid because you can't fucking prioritize shit, because that's going to be the exact motherfucker that's out harassing somebody because of their skin color. The one that thinks they can handle all that shit. If we got a police force and we still have murders, all those motherfuckers need to be not worrying about speeding or fucking running stop signs. They need to be worrying about murders, period. But We can't have that fucking conversation because it's left and right. It's blue and red. No, you're a Democrat. You're a Republican. We can't have it. Man, it's fucking insane to me that this far, I mean, it's not unexpected. What the fuck am I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I've got high expectations for humans. But this is my 5-year-old self disappointed as fuck. This much later, like, I still gotta like wishful thinking about just a year or like a day of no fucking murder. That's crazy to me.
I mean,
that's wishful thinking.
It's only possible if you limit it to like as far as you can see, and then it's really easy to accomplish that day with no murders. But as soon as it starts getting bigger beyond your scope of vision, it just doesn't scale, because eventually you have enough people that weird shit begins to happen, like weird interaction dynamics, interpersonal dynamics start to play out on their own, and these are things that we have, no control over, because these are other humans. They're individuals. They have their own thing going. And after a while, you get to like a couple million people. Eventually, someone's probably going to kill somebody, because humans do human shit. And humans cross other humans' lines, and that final straw, and all the other colloquialisms that describe the breaking point when someone decides to go and do some fucking horrible shit. I mean, aside from technology, how different is life really? I mean, how far do we have to go back before? I mean, obviously, I'm not saying like how far do we have to go back before humans ancestor is born ready to go. That's probably like some kind of fish creature, an amphibian, or a Silurian or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, even the chimp needs like a period with the mother or father. They're not ready to go. So
there's a whole bunch of science fiction that wants to put criminals on a remote island and let them fend for themselves. And of course, one of them is really crafty and develops a boat or a plane that can somehow get back to civilization. I'm on board with this, like, round up the murderous people, but I think we should definitely put them on an island.
They already tried that once, and we see how Australia turned out.
Yeah, that's way too much island.
It's like, man, yeah,
they get one island. They get a landing pad or a drop zone where a container will be lowered.
We can't be doing like the Minority Report pre-crime arrest shit, but there's a point where it's like, okay, this person has done some horrible shit. They need to be gone from society, period. Oh, no more. And that's where just putting them in a cage obviously that's not humane either. So like you're saying, maybe some sort of island is like the most humane way of not killing those people outright. But
I mean, obviously, at some point, there's going to be some incarcerated individual on the island who, for all of the reasons of like birth lottery, is somehow like uniquely skilled at living on an island. And they might be terrifying, but they might not be able to get off the island. We select a good island for this, one with like really horrible rocky formations around it, so boats can't get to it. They can only drop people off with like a helicopter. It's not even a helicopter, it's a drone, and it's programmed to like crash into the mountainside or something if something goes wrong. And like detonate or something, Robots can take care of themselves. They don't have some like threshold of like, oh, I think I can survive this incident. Now the robot's like, oh yeah, screw you, buddy. I'll overheat my motors and detach my blades. have fun picking up your buddies. And then, let's see, what is that? Like, there's 4 blades per, so 16 blades go flying off and cutting people up. I mean, a drone big enough to drop off a shipping container is, you know, a helicopter. It's a giant fucking aircraft. So something like that would definitely kill a bunch of people if they tried to take it. Maybe they could just give it some kind of like way to electrify its hull so that if anyone tried to touch it, they would just get, you know, electrocuted. Get too close and when it gives you a really bad burn, hold on to it and it blows your arm off. That kind of shit. And it's got a giant battery anyways. Everything's going to be electric because they're going to find a bunch of like lithium on that giant gold and titanium and platinum rock that's flying around our solar system. You know, the irony of a movie about that exact same thing happening, except in the movie it hits the Earth, and then the announcement's like, "Oh yeah, we're actually going to send a fucking mining team to this giant rock." Motherfuckers! They wouldn't tell us if it was actually going to hit. The movie's just like a bad joke. But if that turns out to be like real, man, I'm going to be so pissed for like 20 minutes.
Here's the problem with that scenario. It's so Earth-centric for that to happen. And the main reason is there is a fucking asteroid field and a gigantic planet at the edge of the solar system. So there's all these big gravitational wells, and then including the sun, there's no actual reason something that enters our solar system from like the furthest edge actually makes it to our planet in a big enough form to do massive damage anymore, because it's happened so many times already.
Oh yeah, and like the closest things that get the closest objects that fly by are like millions of miles away. We're going to be lucky to see the Apophis thing fly between the Earth and the Moon in 2029.
And that's where if it goes like between the Earth and the Moon, that's like the closest thing that happens. And that's like
probably for the next million years.
It's big enough to go between the Earth and the Moon. It's either going to hit the Moon, or then it's going to lose enough mass by the time it comes into the atmosphere that it's like not anything of substance. And that's kind of like, it's not chance. It's 4 billion years of that exact thing happening over and over and over, to the point where the things toward the center have more stability because everything has happened in most, not most of the trajectories, in the most likely trajectories of that happening. Those things have happened enough that now it's not likely to happen. So that's where the notion of those movies are like the 1 trillion to 1 scenario where like, yeah, it could happen, but it's like really 1 trillion to 1 or something really absurd.
Well, my understanding is that like we got really lucky by having Saturn, because apparently most solar systems with a big gas planet, the gas planets typically they like to move in and absorb all of the rocky planets. And most solar systems are binary systems apparently, which is kind of blows my mind. So, but like Jupiter should have eaten Mars and the Earth and Venus by now, but it didn't.
It's so far away.
But it's so far.
That's where.
But Saturn is really far away. It's like the distance to the Jupiter. Like that's the distance between Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's every so often it just tugs just enough. Fucking Jupiter's like, fine, I won't go eat them.
Which, like, here's the problem. If you actually wanted to represent our solar system at scale, it's so like, it takes it takes basically to the edge of your not to the edge of whatever city you're in, but it's going to take 20 to 30 kilometers of space.
And
they've done videos of it.
There's a Vimeo where they do it, and they have a beach ball for the sun, and the Earth's like a marble, and something like I what is it like? Not is it Saturn or is it? I think it's Saturn's like 7 miles away. Pluto's like you can't even see it anymore. Like
Pluto's like in the next city or something.
Yeah, well they do it now like out in the desert, but
there's one in Bloomington actually.
Oh, like, no shit.
Yeah, and we have part of one that is done at scale, and I don't know if they left it up. Like it should probably still be up, but one of the buildings is one of the sites is at the Poplars parking lot, and then one is at the city courthouse. I think there's like a couple of places in town, and then the further it gets, then you get to like Ellettsville, or I don't think it's Ellettsville the direction, but it's like
it'd be really cool if they were smart enough to include like a quarry at the correct distance to represent the Oort cloud. Or maybe just like a pile of gravel that'd be sufficient. Like an ice machine would actually make the most sense. Oh, so I was reading that apparently all of the bright shiny objects that we see in the sky, for the longest time, it's like, some of these are stars, but the vast majority of them are not stars. Most of them are what we thought were galaxies. And it turns out we can't even see the galaxies because those stars don't put off that much light, but their freaking quasars do. So, like, almost all of the stars in the sky are some kind of, like, radio burst in light emission from a freaking black hole. And there are black holes everywhere. And I've been reading recently that it's believed that a significant portion of what we account for as black or dark matter might just be like a primordial black hole. So black holes and dark matter may be one and the same. I'm not sure if this changes anything. It just kind of like makes it easier to digest. But also that black holes themselves are these big hairy structures that are very similar to stars. Just, light cannot escape them. And they have immense gravity. Like time-stretching gravity.
Unless they're big enough that they're leaking radiation.
Yeah, in which case they become supermassive centers of entire galaxies that emit light. In which case, that's so fucking cool. I just think that it's interesting, like the way that the dynamic of our understanding of stars and stellar mass, and then a black hole. Really, it seems more like a black hole. The science fiction black hole really only exists at the smallest scale because we can't even get to the center of a galaxy because it's too violent, and the gravitational shearing effect just destroys everything. Like we have there are reconstructions and animations of the trajectories and paths of stars that orbit supermassive black holes, and they're flying around at millions of miles an hour, and at these crazy paths like corkscrews around the thing before they loop back. And it's like it's the kind of thing that makes the three-body problem seem like a walk in the park, apparently, because there's 12 stars, giant stars, or black holes maybe, all spinning around a black hole that's the size of a large solar system. The entire large solar system. And then now there are a bunch of them, because all that dark matter is really just some tiny black hole. And we could have a tiny black hole right next to our solar system, and we wouldn't even know. The binary pair of our sun might be some really tiny black hole, and we don't even know. Yeah. We couldn't even know. We wouldn't be able to measure it because it'd be too small. We wouldn't be able to see it.
Which is pretty insane.
It'd be like the size of a large minivan. Yeah. Good luck finding that in space.
Yeah. Oh, so space is so big, man. And that's and what I was getting at earlier with the representations is that it's just we had terrible examples growing up because there was just not enough space to give an accurate model of space or even our own solar system. So I think a lot of people's perceptions of the size of space is like stunted by proxy of that.
I think it'd be really easy if someone were to watch Star Trek a few times or Stargate a few times to think that intragalactic travel is easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because those are story mechanisms that are used to cut the time down into an episodic story mechanism.
And they cut out the travel time. So if they're going 5 light years away, they cut out the 2 weeks where they were just at warp 6 or some shit.
Because they're not trying to tax the engines and crack the dilithium crystals.
Yeah.
Nobody
or
actually
when
runs
they do show
at full warp.
Right. Well, I was gonna say when they do show it, it's a holodeck episode.
Yeah. Well, no, they run at full warp for like emergency purposes, but they can't do it for long.
No, they're
never. It's only during emergency. And of course, we see a lot of emergency stories, so it seems like they're always traveling at warp 10. But no, Geordi would have been like, "I'm slowing down the engines," and Picard would be like, "Make it so."
Well, and then it's hard.
Even Star Wars fucks up the perception of distance.
Yeah,
because hyperspace. Babylon 5
I feel like Dune got it. I mean, because of the mechanism, it makes it really easy to be like, okay, they're just folding space, not just folding space, but they're folding space. They're not using a propulsion mechanism. Yeah. So that makes it a lot easier to be like, okay, I'm mapping this part of space and I'm mapping this other part of space, and then I fold them together. That's like a much more rational and logical science fiction mechanism than actual any form of
Foundation gets it right too. They
do the same shit.
They have the whole water effect.
It's folding space.
Yeah, it's just folding space. In a sense, that's what warp drive is, except that they have to propel themselves across folded space really slowly, and that's what takes a long time. I don't think warp drive is folded space in that it's it's localized bent gravitational fields, whereas it's like okay, the warp bubble is basically putting a soap bubble around an object that allows it to slide through space, whereas the wormholes in the Star Trek universe are actually folding space. It's like they have folding space, and then also the Discovery mycelium drive is folding space because they have the warp drive and they have the mycelium drive, which they're two different mechanisms. And that's where, again, folding space definitely exists in the Star Trek universe, but that's not necessarily what the warp drives are doing. Well, yeah, Scotty describes it as moving space around the ship.
Yeah, it's like a soap bubble, like where again it's like this is why a soap bubble, if you increase the pressure at the back and decrease the pressure around the front, it moves through space really easily, and that's like effectively what a warp bubble does to a ship. It increases the gravitation at the rear and decreases the gravitation around the front, so it like modifies the gravitation on the local level, allowing the object to slide through space faster in a specific direction. Whereas, like I said, the wormhole and the mycelium drive are the space folding, where it takes two separate coordinates and folds them together.
Yeah, so folding space still exists in Star Trek.
Yeah, totally. And in multiple different form, like it's not even just one form. Like the mycelium network is not the same space folding mechanism as the wormhole. And
or a slipstream drive.
Right. Or the slipstream. Because that's even the Borg network uses subspace.
Yeah. The conduit system.
Yeah, so that's even a different system, and that's like they have so many different space travel mechanisms in Star Trek that it like makes it more believable because they're not all using the same physics, but the physics all. I mean, it's science fiction anyway.
Well, there's like an energy exchange rate that exists within Star Trek where, you know, for lack of a better terms, there are energy credits that are extended or are utilized at a given point for anything, and doing something requires a lot of energy at some points. Physics
still applies.
You still have to generate energy somewhere. It has to come from. It doesn't matter where it comes from. That's the hand waving part that we like, because Geordi can use a 15-syllable, you know, compound word to describe something that doesn't exist, and then boom, on-screen magic, flashy lights, and highest energy output the engines have ever reached ever in history. Geordi is the man, and we love those stories because Geordi is the man.
Yeah, and then with it, and this is where, you know, science fiction has the liberty within its universe to create MacGuffins and create things that don't necessarily follow real world rules, but when they create rules that have consequences, it makes that more real. And I think that's where it's like, yeah, you can come up with the spore drive, but then the person who does the spore drive can't just jump constantly. They have to have some sort of physical tax. And it's like, they can't jump 2 times in a row necessarily, or there has to be a cool down period between jumps or something, where you can't just let this MacGuffin get them out of every situation, or else it ruins the story. And I think that's like where
it eats the mycelial network or something like that, or
right, something has to happen, or like then it becomes too easy for that mechanism to ruin the capacity for the story to have meaning.
So I watched the 7th episode of Discovery the other day, and man, it's just the most indecisive version of Star Trek.
It is.
It's the weirdest feeling. It's like, why am I sitting in on like the Federation Council meeting to discuss anything? Why is this captain? What the hell's going on? What's the deal with their freaking
imposter syndrome?
What's the deal with this freaking ship having some like teenager fit? Like seriously,
yeah, it's really hard to watch it, and I still like Discovery in theory.
I like the idea of Discovery.
I like the idea of Discovery, but season 4 is unbearable, and
at least
it didn't have to be this unbearable. I feel like the writers of Discovery must all have imposter syndrome and are all using the Discovery script to work through their problems, and then the actors have to suffer through it, because I feel like
this is the Star Trek that was written by people that never watched freaking Star Trek.
Yeah, that's part of it. But what I also realize is they're trying and failing at representing Michael Burnham's emotional evolution, because she started off like with the Vulcan sense of not showing emotion and not indulging in emotion, and now she's like all emotion and all intuition, and she's going with her gut every time. And
she makes that face, that really serious, concerned face. I have to do this. I'm the only one who's qualified to do this. All hope relies on Michael Burnham. Ugh.
Yeah. So that's where I see what they're doing with that attempt at showing the emotional, her trying to learn how to emote. But it's really unbearable to suffer through.
I think Beckett Mariner is way further along the path of being in line for being a Kirk-style captain. Yeah. I don't think that Michael Burnham is capable of arriving at like an entry-level Picard style of captaining. And I think that's the problem is they're trying to make this character too diplomatic. And I'm not saying I want an action-packed, let's blow everything up version of Star Trek, but she's like the most indecisive captain ever. It's really bothering the shit out of me. Star Trek captains aren't supposed to be, or Starfleet captains aren't supposed to be indecisive. They're not supposed to have these, like, they're supposed to be decisive. They're supposed to be able to communicate these things, and it's just really surreal. Maybe my expectations for the Federation in 1,000 years is like, or 1,000 years later, is like unrealistic.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not adjusting to this properly, but
I mean, I don't think it's you, man. I don't think it's you.
I think Lower Decks, as Star Trek properties go, is way better. Lower Decks is the Star Trek that I kind of needed. It's fun and it's episodic and it's not too serious.
Well,
I'm really getting worn out with everything being like just Armageddon level. Everything's Armageddon level. And
it's really hard to watch more than one episode at a time because it's constantly emotional stress and the fucking lens flare, and like you're saying, it's always black alert, red alert, black alert, red alert. Like, yeah, no, they're totally trying to trigger the audience into feeling like you had a bunch of action happen, and even then, the action sequences in season 1 felt in place, whereas now it feels forced, and it feels like they're just making sure to have action so that people aren't like, well, since they got woke, they don't even have action anymore. Like, no, we have action.
They did screw up. Michelle Yeoh lended a whole hell of a lot of action, just capability. Like that,
and they used it.
They did, and once that character is no longer part of the broader story universe, like Michael Burnham isn't going to engage in whatever the Vulcan.
You're right. This series should have been about Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah, it should have been about.
It really should have been about Michelle Yeoh, and the action would have made way more sense. This could have been Kung Fu on the Discovery.
Kung Fu Star Trek. That would have been fan-fucking-tastic. She would have been... If her story would have been fan-fucking-amazing.
Michael Burnham is Grasshopper. And, you know, obviously, if Michelle Yeoh, she doesn't have to die in this iteration, which is where, again...
yeah, what the hell? That was a mistake.
Yeah, this whole series should have been more centered on her at first instead of trying to make it about Michael Burnham immediately. I think that was like that was where they rushed something that could have been made into more of a mentorship. Whereas I feel like that's what we got with Picard and Riker, which is why we came to appreciate Riker more, rather than like if Enterprise or Next Generation would have been about Riker from the beginning, none of us would have liked Riker. There would have been like a minority, but Riker had
right
to
off the bat. He was
did.
just showboat.
He did.
He had to learn how to
Michael
rein
Burnham.
that shit in.
And so did Michael Burnham, which is also why you can't make it about them immediately, because then it makes the audience like hone in on all their problems.
Well, I think they realized that, and they tried to bring back Michelle Yeoh's character as the Emperor from the Mirror Universe, and that was the point of is they realized, oh, we can't get rid of this character too soon, guys. She tests really well. The audience really likes her. Maybe we shouldn't have killed her off right off the freaking bat. But no, I agree. I think that if we'd have had like a Shinjo focused Discovery for the first season at least, where we got to really know why she was the captain and why she chose Burnham, and why they could have made Burnham's mutiny actually hurt instead of just be confusing. This is like some really serious post-mortem, because we're in season 4 now. This is 4 years ago. They really could have done a lot better with the lineup that they had right off the bat. It was basically a freaking movie. It was good. It looked so good. It was like light years beyond anything that we'd had in a TV series.
Well, it's like $8 million per episode, so it's gonna look beautiful.
Yeah.
But the writers all have imposter syndrome. That's my conclusion, because now we've literally got an AI with imposter syndrome.
Well, when we have episodes of Picard that are awesome, and they show us Picard's story arc that lasts 10 episodes. So what is that? 6 hours almost. That's awesome. They gave us a really hardcore Picard story. Everyone wanted it. They might give us more Picard story. I'm not sure we need it. It's not like they don't know how to do it. It's just, I think they had the wrong team. And now they're stuck with this really preposterous story arc that just keeps getting worse at every step. At least Lower Decks is fun.
Yeah.
They make Star Trek really fun. Oh, by the way, we're kind of like plummeting into that black hole over there. What are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. We'll fix it in a few minutes. We've got 20 minutes for this episode.
Well, I feel like there's a missed opportunity to... One of the coolest things I've seen is when the aspect ratio gets used to signify a change in something, where like it goes from letterbox to full aspect ratio, and it's like some directors can use that shit. I think Denis Villeneuve did it in Dune, if I'm not mistaken, like where you like transition from... There's like one scene where you transition from looking at one person and then it looks over Arrakis. I feel like that happened in Dune, and you're like,
where they actually take advantage of the gigantic space in front of them, and
but it's used as a transitional to like make the audience feel something, but it's so subtle that they didn't realize why they felt that thing. So this is where I feel like Discovery is missing out on an opportunity to use the aspect ratio when they're being, or like the letterbox aspect ratio when it's like about the character or dialogue, and then switch to full screen when it's like action. And I
think that this is a problem that happens with television series, is that there's always been like a style of television cinematography or videography, and that style is not really compatible with film cinematography.
Yeah,
and so, the whole style of framing is different. The way they do everything is different. But what I really had hoped for, especially with the first season of Discovery, was it seemed like they were doing a lot of film lighting and film blocking and film, just the framing. Everything was much more film-like in terms of everything. And what I see now is more like it's all indoors, and sometimes they do the big space scenes, but they're tighter than they used to be. And whereas, Next Generation started out as a TV show with a big square, and it eventually found its way into a big screen with a letterbox. They managed to take advantage of that giant space really well because they'd had, 7 seasons to think about all the things that they wanted to really showcase about, the Enterprise in space. And so we actually get to see, Picard and his team flying into battle with Borg at some point even. So that's cool. They destroy that giant the scimitar or whatever. All that stuff's awesome. And all that stuff was on a scale that was like impossible on a television screen in the 90s. And so, Discovery is kind of, I felt like they were taking a lot of cues from the Kelvin timeline, from all of the new, the whole reboot of Star Trek itself. And especially because there were murmurs that it was, that they were going to spin off a new Enterprise with Pike, with Captain Pike, and that was going to lead right into the original series, and it could also lead right into the Kelvin timeline if they decide to emphasize this is the whatchamacallit. There's a temporal event that's immutable or some crap. I don't know. But I always thought that was interesting. There was talk of an effort to make it all make sense, but now that Discovery takes place 1,000 years later or into its own future, there's no requirement that any of it makes sense. They can do whatever they want. So I guess,
which I feel like that was a smart thing for them to do, but then because of that, it gave them too much freedom in the sense of now we're here and nothing makes sense. None of it makes sense at all. And then that's where I'm like, okay, maybe they're going to be like, now we've been in the mirror universe for 5 years and you didn't realize it. I don't know.
The thing is, when they're having that freaking Federation Council meeting about what to do about the DMA or whatever it is, it's like, guys, all of these are Federation members. They know better. They're supposed to be, ethically enlightened at this point. They're work capable. They're supposed to be. It's 1,000 years in the future. I get it. Things have changed. The Jade Order or whatever, the Orion Syndicate grew into something much worse. I get it. Things got nasty. Warp travel disappeared. Things were fucked up for a while. But
But the further we get into it, the more it makes it seem like Lorca was right.
Man, Lorca was such a good character.
He was, and it's fucked up that's where I'm like, I on the one hand, I'm really questioning what the writers are fucking doing, but then I'm like, okay, if this is all to bring back Lorca at some point and be like, yeah, Lorca was right. Okay, maybe. But it's real rough. It's for the show being as ethnically diverse and action oriented and science oriented as it is. It's all of the things that I should love, but it's become unbearable. And I want to make sure that I have put that on record so other people don't feel weird for feeling that when they're watching it. Because I'm like, man.
I just want to make sure everyone who feels this way knows that there's a show called Lower Decks, which it's an animation, but it has plenty of space kung fu. It's
fucking amazing.
It's amazing. It's hilarious. And it's episodic, so it's not this gigantic, crazy, got to pay attention for 3 episodes deep so you can understand what's going on right now. You don't even have to do that. You can just enjoy it. And they make fun of all the things that we make fun of about Star Trek that we're supposed to enjoy making fun of. Yeah. They lay it out. It's so brilliant that it makes me wonder why does it have to be a cartoon? Why couldn't they figure out how to do this with humans?
It doesn't work in live action.
Yeah,
it doesn't work in live action.
I know you can't slice somebody's leg off and make it look like a ham. I get it.
Old Riker doesn't work in live action anymore.
Yeah,
I don't think Picard. I mean, we got an iteration of Picard that works. That motherfucker needs to be in 3D CGI for adults. not for kids, for adults. And that's where like now there's this element of live action's not the best place for storytelling in necessarily like science fiction, because it's stuff that relies really heavy on CGI. Like, do you remember Advent Children?
Yeah.
Just imagine trying to do Advent Children in live action. This shit would not work.
No.
Even now.
I actually think about it. Like Lower Decks Riker is way cooler than live action Riker.
Bro, exactly.
And, like,
because you can do crazier shit.
And live action or Lower Decks Picard would probably be like a Bugs Bunny level character.
But I don't mean Lower Decks Picard. I mean Ghost in the Shell Picard.
Ghost in the Shell Picard. That's like
now that he's got a fucking android body.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, now we can get Ghost in the Shell Picard. And that's what I'm saying. Like, let Janeway have Prodigy. We need an adult fucking Picard that's Ghost in the Shell, 3D CGI, where he's fucking got guns in his arms and shit now. And he can like hack into systems.
Like,
and he's got
like the physical capabilities of Data and like
exactly,
all of the knowledge and experience.
Yar. Data fuck Yar in
like the third episode
2. Yeah, the second and third, where it's like, yeah, and he had a thing for Yar after she was dead, where you're like, okay, we can make those kinds of jokes. We didn't have to see it. It was adult enough without having to show any nudity, but it was adult. You can't have kids watching that shit.
No.
Like,
oh God,
because it won't make any sense to them either. So that's where I'm like, we need that version of Picard, so then we don't have to have Sir Patrick Stewart trying to fucking decide whether he needs to do his own stunts or not. And he can just do all voice acting and let that motherfucker rest and get paid for just sitting in a chair and doing some awesome voice acting and letting the 3D CGI do the rest.
He basically has the most advanced cybernetic body that exists in that universe.
Yeah,
at that moment in time, he's like he totally is like Major Kusanagi at this point.
Yeah, this is the perfect opportunity to do that kind of story, and then bring back Geordi. They could bring back fucking Cisco. They could bring back everybody in that, and then Cisco could be like a fourth dimensional being and have him do all kinds of cool shit and not be overpowered either.
Can be a space wizard.
Was still, yeah, exactly. And not in like a black fucking only black people can be magic kind of weird way either. But it's like that's the like trajectory they put him on. So let's keep up with that because it was a cool trajectory. So I'm really interested in picking up where Cisco's story left off.
Well, he can appear anywhere he wants now.
Well, because it's like technically they're not Qs. So who's to say they didn't get a war with Qs? Like there's all kinds of shit that they could do where
he can do whatever he wants whenever he wants because he can exist in all time.
Right.
So I think I've always thought a Cisco story would be like a really advanced time travel, a temporal story, like a temporal anomaly correction story where he, has to assemble the team.
Well, they always were.
Yeah.
They always were. Which is the craziest part about like.
So here's where this could actually get really interesting because if he's got like the temporal story unlock, if he has to assemble the squad, this is where Quark actually comes back in because he's the only person conniving enough to think like that. We know Cisco.
Well, I think he's dead though. Armin Shimmerman. I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah. Well, they can bring him back. I know Nog died.
I know. Yeah, you might be right.
It doesn't matter. They can bring all these people back.
Oh yeah, that's right. No, he's still alive. Yeah, he's like 72. Okay.
Well, he was old when that show was on the air. So
that's true. That's true.
I mean, so was Oda. Oda was always old.
Yeah. But what's his name? Wei Yun. Fucking who played?
Dude, that guy had like 5 or 6 or 7 different roles across like every Star or Star Trek franchise.
Combs.
He was on.
He also played Brainiac in the Injustice video game. That's where I'm like, Jeffrey Combs is a fucking amazing voice actor. So I'm like, give him all the Star Trek like animated shit as much as possible, because
that guy, he was in multiple Star Trek series.
He's been in Lower Decks apparently. He played Agamus. That's hilarious. I didn't know before. Huh. That's funny. Yeah, they totally brought him back for Lower Decks.
Yeah, Brunt. He's
Brunt and Wayne, right?
4, 5, 6. He's like 7 different characters across, or 8 different characters across all of Star Trek. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 characters across all of Star Trek so far. That's nuts. He's got
Jeffrey Combs is fucking amazing.
Talk about
but
like
underappreciated too. I mean,
talk about like getting freaking, being committed though. Like that guy is like, I'm going to be in every Star Wars property or Star Trek property. Just you wait and see. I'll do it. Yeah, that's so cool. Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, Lower Decks, Voyager. The champion.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs, man.
Stand Against Evil.
Once, and it was like
he was in Ultraman.
I didn't even give a fuck about him until I was playing Injustice, and I'm like, man, I recognize that voice. Where did I recognize it from? And then I looked up who he was, and I'm like, holy shit! And then I started to realize how many Star Trek characters he had played, and then I'm like, oh my god, this dude is in everything.
He's in Gotham.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs, man. He's like the glue that holds everything together.
He was in Babylon 5. Holy shit. This guy's been in like literally everything.
Everything, man. Everything. All over the DC universe. Yeah. All over video games,
Batman,
animated.
He's been in the Hulk, Agents of Smash. He's been on the Twilight Zone, CSI, a bunch of different Spider-Man stuff, it looks like.
Yeah.
Babylon 5. This dude has been everywhere. Big ups to Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah. he's a really awesome voice actor. I mean, obviously he's a great actor, period. If you can do Brunt and Wei Yun 1 through 6. Dude plays 6 versions of the same character and they're different. Because then, or maybe even 7, because I feel like the 7th one was like, it was either the 6th or the 7th one that was like, I don't want to be part of this anymore.
I think it was the 6th one, and the 7th one came and tracked him down.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. Yeah, because 7 was like...
That's like a real good sport. He's a really good sport if he's willing to pay a character that'll hunt himself down.
Yeah. Man. Progressively worse versions of himself. More and more willing to like go to more extremes, knowing that the other ones would not go to those extremes and then acting accordingly. It was a very unique character progression. It's like if Duncan Idaho had more agency in his clone progression. I guess it's kind of in line with the Jango Boba Fett now.
Man, Boba Fett shows is a...
Yeah, that says it all. That says it all.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's you want to like it, you want to appreciate it, but it's clearly just franchise exploitation in the worst way, where it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
I want to like it.
They put a lot of effort into creating a mythology for Boba in the Clone Wars animated series, and they've created a space for him within Mandalorian, so they want to expand upon that. But there's like Commander Rex. He survived Order 66. He was a fucking bad motherfucker of a clone. He survived like all the way into the destruction of the second Death Star. They retconned his character to be that old dude in the jungle scene, and so like that's a character. I mean, they tell part of his story in Star Wars Rebels. The dude survives the entire fucking time. They should tell his story if they want to tell the story of a clone, because he was one of the good guys. Like, give us that guy. He was cool.
Yeah.
There were plenty of clones they could have told the story of.
And
was
they
a
could have made
criminal.
Finn a fucking Jedi, for fuck's sake. There's a bunch of shit they could have done.
Yeah, they could have made. Yeah.
It was clearly being set up that he was gonna have Force powers, but then they just like did not pay that shit off.
No,
I'm
they
like,
just kept cutting him up with a lightsaber. That was his fate. To get beat up. To get beat up, to get beat the crap out of, to get cut up, to get thrown in a fucking cylinder and float around in water for a while. And
and they could have easily made Kelly Tran Force, like there's all these people that they could have been like, oh, now the Force is actually in these people too, and not just
they
this
could have
like
had a whole like oh, it turns out that anyone is actually Force capable. You just have to be around the right kind of rocks and the right kind of training to learn how to use these rocks.
Right. Otherwise, it's a eugenics story.
Yeah. they had this really great opportunity to make it like way inclusive. Hey, guess what? Anyone can do it. You don't have to be a religious zealot to utilize a flashlight anymore.
Yep.
Here, so you put this thing inside and you turn it on. It's like seriously, it's a flashlight, except it could kill you. Nope, they didn't do that. They continued the eugenics story.
Cater to the eugenics crowd, which they did. Which is why Kelly Tran had to shut down her social media.
That's why her character turned out to be so, understated and annoying, instead of being a proud and contributing member of the team. Her character didn't make any damn sense. She's just angry. They didn't tell her story properly. They edited the shit out of it just horribly.
Yeah. Well, and then you can't exploit minority actors as being part of a cast and then not go to extra lengths to protect them on social media.
Yeah.
That's not fair, and it becomes
It's not cool, Disney.
It's an exploitative way of getting pseudo representation, because they get the face in the property forever, but then the person's left to fend for themselves as if Disney's not the one that put them out there. So that's where I'm like, I see, because Warner Brothers doesn't really protect its minority actors or actresses either. So you see like Candace Patton just get trolled relentlessly on social media because she's a black woman. Nobody's fucking trolling Grant Gustin. Nobody's trolling Ezra Miller in the same ways. Like, they'll troll Ezra Miller about when he choked that woman, but they're not trolling him about being a race or a gender, or because he's a certain race or gender. Whereas like Candace Patton, she has to deal with that shit just because she's a black woman, or Kelly Tran just had to deal with that shit because she's an Asian woman. And it's like, they just got left to fend for themselves, where it feels like Candace Patton has been able to deal with it because it seems like she has better support. Or Javicia Leslie on Batwoman. The way she's like the writers come to her aid, but the actual organization is definitely not doing anything to stop the trolling, which is where I see the shit. I see how they'll put a woman at the lead role, or even what's her name, Ruby Rose. When Ruby Rose was lead, they didn't do anything to fucking protect her, and then you find out it's because they were creating unsafe work environments, and the stunts were fucking dangerous and getting people injured. So then they were trying to make her look bad so she wouldn't have any say when she's going to start accusing them of creating an unsafe work environment. So they like never really defended her personality from the beginning. So then when it was like Ruby Rose gets replaced, then the studio starts talking shit about her, only for her to come out and say, yeah, guess what? They fucked up my back because they didn't test the stunt equipment correctly. And then I was put in an unsafe work environment and all this other stuff.
Well,
about
they
how
expect her
like,
to go back to work after really quickly after back surgery.
Yeah.
Surgery.
Oh, yeah.
What the surgery means?
They caused the need for.
That means poking in places that, like next to the spine, this is a very delicate place.
Because then they were trying to make her feel bad. They're like, hey, other people are going to be losing their pay if you don't come back to work. And it's like, that's your guys' fault. All of it was their fault. And then they try to put it on her shoulders and then don't do anything to change the image in the public as if.
It just sounds like somebody didn't sign off on the right insurance policy. Obviously, that's what happened. You know, somebody had signed the right insurance policy. The studio would have gotten paid because she got injured, and then everyone would have been like.
But they might not have been able to get it, and that's what you then learn is like. That's right. What you're saying is right, but a lot of these insurance companies won't insure unless certain things look a certain way, and then they'll skirt around the rules. So then when shit actually happens, then the insurance policies won't pay, and then it becomes this. So it's like this big cycle of rules being skirted and insurance policies not being paid out, and then NDAs existing. So then nobody can ever disclose any aspect of it until the NDA lapses, which then by that time, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah. You know, I read this thing. Apparently, Nick Cage said something about how it's one thing to be an actor, and you know, actors that's a job, but like to be a movie star is like completely different. You have to know how to ride a motorcycle. You have to know how to drive a sports car. You have to know how to operate a firearm. And he's talking about like responsibility that movie stars have because they stand, you know, out from the crowd. And you know, he acknowledged that all that entire situation with Mr. Baldwin sucks. But he's also basically saying, like, yeah, you're supposed to know about these things. You're supposed to check, basically. And there's like this aspect of personal responsibility. And I think that our society, you know, it rewards people who act out, who go ham, who yeet. And that's fine, but we also have a system that launches people into a place of visibility that nobody's trained for. Like
that's true.
Even movie stars aren't really trained for that until they're there, and then it's like a trial by fire type situation. It seems where either they figure out how to function in that system and how to survive and how to succeed, or that industry just chews them up and spits them out and waits for the next fresh meat, and they're just going to do it again. And it's unfortunate the way that seems to be, that cycle seems to perpetuate, because it clearly costs a lot of in terms of resources, but it also there's a cost in terms of talent and how that talent is affected over time, and the pool of talent is affected over time. Affects our ability to tell stories, and then we're left with reality television.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Bass Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
It's good, man. Talk to you soon.